Yama is, in one sense, a secret ally of Savitri, and later on he blesses her effort. Now, this transformation of Yama is something very remarkable in this part of the dialogue, and the complexity of this dialogue ranges over a wide variety of philosophical themes. In Canto 1 of Book 9, what comes through is the terror that the god of death creates, hoping that Savitri would retreat, but Savitri doesn't, and this challenges Savitri to realize her full self, and you see, she realizes her full being, and Savitri is a transformed Savitri as she confronts the god of death. Now, here in Canto 2, we have seen in the first part, as in Vyasa's story, the god of death keeps asking Savitri to go back. You will be safe within human limits. That's what Yama says to her. And there is no way you can survive in my void. And he defines the parameters of this void, he defines the nature of this void. And then you realize that this Yama is also something that you don't find depicted anywhere else in Indian scriptures, which is the very negation, symbolizes the very negation of this created manifestation of earth. Not only is he against further evolution, he in fact is against the world as it is now created. He tolerates it on condition that when it pleases him, he should be able to extinguish it, to snuff it out. Now, this is what Savitri is challenging. Savitri is asserting that although the world arises from the inconscient, at the bottom of the inconscient there is the superconscient. Inconscient was only a disguise of the superconscient, and it is through this disguise the world arises. Inconscient, therefore, is the basic material needed for manifestation, but it is not the reality behind the world. This is something the god of death has to learn by and by. And now, as we have seen, Sri Aurobindo, exactly as in Vyasa's story, makes the god of death offer a boon to Savitri. There, Yama is gracious, here he is not. He, even while granting the boon, the words he uses, the language he uses is barbed. And he says, all right, if you want sight back for Satyavan's father, I will give it to him. But I'm sure one day he will rue this. He will be sorry that he has his sight back. Because he didn't have the sight, he was in the process of finding a new illumination within his own heart. Now that sight has come back to him, he will lose that opportunity. In other words, the god of death is ready for a compromise between God, but not in manifestation, not in full bloom, but away from manifestation. He has sympathy for that kind of an approach rather than what Savitri stands for. Savitri stands for God fulfilled in manifestation. So there is this undercurrent that the god of death is prepared for a compromise, but the compromise is this, that all right, I do realize there may be some being, there may be some immortality, but in that immortality there is no place for love. In that immortality there is no place for the other. On these conditions I grant you that you can be immortal. Savitri says, I am immortal. I always claim that this immortality is not just an immortality in being, it's also an immortality in the becoming. And I want to experience this immortality in the becoming. And love is a manifestation of this. And all this is an anathema to the god of death. He tries to avoid this kind of a confrontation, and Savitri then says, all right, now you have given me this boon, don't expect me to return, don't expect me to go back. On page 590 he says, as you have seen, wherever thou leadst his soul, I shall pursue. No matter where you take him, no matter how vast your abysmal inconscient is, I will chase you, I will follow you no matter where you take him. Then, as you have seen a little later on page 590, we did this yesterday. I just will read that part. Line 310. Hast thou, God, wings or feet that tread my stars? Frail creature with the courage that aspires, forgetting thy bounds of thought, thy mortal robe. How do you hope to span the vast expanses of my inconscient? Do you have God wings? Or do you have God feet? You have feet of clay. You are just a mortal. How do you hope to do this? These orbs were coiled before thy soul was formed. You know, the pathways of the sun and the stars and the planets and the earth and all this creation was formed by me before you were ever formed, you were even thought of. I, death, created them out of my void. All things I have built in them, and I destroy. I am prepared to build anything on this world, but I claim the right to destroy it. So I built all these things. I built the sun, the stars, the planets, the moon, the whole creation. And I have the right to destroy it at will. I made the worlds my net, each joy a mesh, a hunger amorous of its suffering prey, life that devours my image see in things. If you want to see the great truth behind this creation, it is hunger is the great truth behind creation. So if something is allowed to live, it is allowed to live so that it fattens itself and becomes a prey to a power greater than itself. So he says, life that devours, this is the great secret. Hunger, the great hunger that Brihadaranyaka talks about. It's the great hunger here, and I have sent this hunger into this world. This hunger represents me. Mortal whose spirit is my wandering breath, whose transience was imagined by my smile. Flee, clutching thy poor gains to thy trembling breast, pierced by my pangs, time shall not soon appease. Whatever little crumbs I have thrown at you, gather them, clutch them to your heart, and run as fast as you can from here. If you tarry here any longer, if you linger here any longer, then retribution will take you, retribution will strike you. And he says, pierced by my pangs, time shall not soon appease. This is where I think we left yesterday, and I said I was getting out of breath. People got the impression that I was not feeling well. It was not feeling well. To read sure one real come bleeding to me at the last, thy nothingness recognized, my greatness known, turn or attempt forbidden happy fields, meant for the souls that can obey my law. Happiness, a little bit of it, is reserved for only those people who learn to live within the limits. Those who defy the limits I have laid down, for them I have various kinds of engines of persecution. Desire is one, etc. And then he says, lest in their somber shrines thy tread awake from their uneasy, iron-hearted sleep, the furies who avenge fulfilled desire. This is a peculiar, Sri Aurobindo's perceptions are not mainly in great philosophical utterances, when small sentences like this. He says, even fulfilled desire, desire which is fulfilled, can give rise to furies. We normally expect unfulfilled desire, but even desire fulfilled, and that fury is even greater, because fulfilled desire, what it does is it gives rise to a more furious desire, a more stronger desire. So it keeps you prodding on and on and on. And therefore he says, take heed, take care. I have so far been, quite liberal with you, quite kind to you. I have been only talking to you. I have been threatening to you in words. But don't think this will be the case forever and ever. There are elemental laws that govern this whole universe. And if you transgress them, I don't have to do anything. The laws have ways of avenge this transgression. Be careful, that's what he says. Dread, lest in skies where passion hoped to live, the unknown's lightning start, and terrified, lone, sobbing, hunted by the hounds of heaven, a wounded and forsaken soul thou flee through the long torture of the centuries. Not many lives exhaust the tireless wrath. Hell cannot slake, nor heaven's mercy assuage. Furies of natural law disturbed. What do? They hound you, they chase you down the corridors of time over several lives, not just one life, over several lives. Please be careful. Don't challenge these furies, don't challenge these forces. Dread, fear, dread. Otherwise, lest in skies where passion hoped to live, the unknown's lightning start, and terrified. The picture that he creates, terrified, lone, sobbing, hunted by the hounds of heaven, a wounded and forsaken soul, thou flee through the long torture of the centuries. Not many lives exhaust the tireless wrath, nor many lives exhaust the tireless wrath. This will be such a tireless wrath, anger of the furies, that you won't be able to exhaust it even through many lives. Hell cannot slake, nor heaven's mercy assuage. I will take from thee the black eternal grip. Now, if I wish, if I want it, I can take from you this fury, this eternal grip of the black forces, clasping in thy heart thy fate's exiguous dole. Exiguous is scanty. The scanty, I have thrown some bread crumbs at you. Hold them on, take them on, put them in your bag, lock it up, and then put it on your head and then run for life. This is what he says. Depart in peace, if peace for man is just. I don't know whether you even deserve peace. Your insolence, I don't think you even deserve peace, but I am so large-hearted, so kind, I let you go in peace on condition that you don't tarry here any longer. But Savitri answered, meeting scorn with scorn. If he can be scornful, Savitri also can be scornful. The mortal woman to the dreadful Lord, who is this God imagined by thy night? You seem to have a monopoly on gods. You seem to have created your own gods with your own paint, your own brush. Who is this God imagined by thy night? Contemptuously creating worlds disdained, who made for vanity the brilliant stars. Your God seems to have made all this creation as a boastful act, who made for vanity the brilliant stars. Not he who has reared his temple in my thoughts and made his sacred floor my human heart. My God is different. The God that has reared, the God that has been nourished, invoked in the temple of my thoughts, the God whose tread has made my heart sacred, the floor of my heart sacred. That's a different God. And the description that you have given of your God doesn't match with my God. My God seems to be a totally different kind of a being. My God is will and triumphs in his paths. My God is love and sweetly suffers all. My God is not vengeful. My God is not a punishing God. My God is love. He puts up with all imperfections, he puts up with all inadequacies, and still enables the earth, human beings to grow. In his dispensation, there is nothing like punishment. That's the God I know. But your God seems to be a kind of a cruel dictator. He has laws, he has rules, and he seems to be, as you just now said, keen to punish everybody. But my God is love and my God is will. It is this will, this Agni, that aspires always for a better day, more perfection here on earth. My God is will and triumphs in his paths. The Vedic Agni is the God, who always aspires, who always leads, who always takes risks. My God is will, my God is love, and sweetly suffers all. Love does not seek to aggrandize itself. Love seeks to suffer. Love seeks to absorb the weaknesses, the poison of the whole world, and still sustain the world. That's the God I have seen. That's the God I have worshipped. That's the God I have invoked in my heart, in my mind. To him I have offered hope for sacrifice and gave my longings as a sacrament. Who shall prohibit or hedge in his course the wonderful, the charioteer, the swift? The wonderful, the God is the Adbhuta, the wonderful spirit, the charioteer, one who controls the chariot, not only of the being, but of the whole world, the charioteer. And in his own way, he is swift. The wonderful, the charioteer, the swift, a traveler of the million roads of life. He steps familiar with the lights of heaven, tread without pain the sword paved courts of hell. There he descends to edge eternal joy. My God of the million roads of life. My God doesn't walk on only one single path, doesn't follow one single road. He lets himself flow along million paths. He steps familiar with the lights of heaven, tread without pain the sword paved courts of hell. Even when he walks on the pavements of hell, which are marked by pointed swords, he treads them. There he descends to enhance eternal joy, to edge eternal joy. And then she is answering the question, do you have God wings? Do you have God feet that you are hoping to walk into my infinite void? What is your power? What is the power? This is the answer she is giving. Love's golden wings have power to fan thy void. The only power I have, because of which I am confident that I will be able to cross the illimitable spaces of your being, is love. Love's golden wings have power to fan thy void. The eyes of love gaze starlike through death's night. The feet of love tread naked, hardest worlds. He labors in the depths, exults on the heights. He shall remake thy universe, O death. My God will remake the universe. The universe that you have made is imperfect. This, my God, will remake the universe, bring perfection to it. She spoke, and for a while no voice replied. Still they travelled through the trackless night, and still that gleam was like a pallid eye, troubling the darkness with its doubtful gaze. Then once more came a deep and perilous pause in that unreal journey through blind of naught. Once more a thought, a word in the void arose, and death made answer to the human soil. Now, when Savitri said, "Love's golden wings have power to fan thy void," Death didn't know what to say in return. He didn't needed some time. He's thinking what to say. Now, what is the answer that I come up with? How do I continue this, pursue this dialogue? Now he concentrates on hope. What is thy hope? To what dost thou aspire? This is thy body's sweetest lure of bliss. Assailed by pain, a frail, precarious form, to please for a few years thy faltering sense, with honey of physical longings and the heart's fire, and a vain oneness seeking to embrace the brilliant idols of a fugitive hour. He says, what is thy hope? What is it you hope to gain? What is it you aspire for? Ultimately, you want Satyavan back. That's your pursuit. Your pursuit is you want to get back Satyavan. And you want it in the name of love, you want it in the name of perfection, you want it in the name of making this world, revising God's plans, etc., etc. These are all big words. What it there basically is, this is thy body's sweetest lure of bliss. All that you are asking is you want a physical companion to live your life, and that you are dressing it up with your imagination and all poetry, etc., etc. The physical mind always believes this, that all this poetry and all this song and dance is simply, ultimately, it is eating a piece of bone. After all, animals eat it, chew it along the street corners. We put it on a china plate and use a fork and spoon, etc., sit in an air-conditioned room, etc. But after all, that's all that life is all about. Basically, this is what life is about. Animals have it, we have it, it's exactly the same. What's the big thing that we are doing? The physical mind, the imagination, sense of beauty, aesthetics, etc., makes life, better and better and better and better. Slowly, the basic thing seems to be a less value. What you eat seems to be of less value than how you eat it. The ambience, the company, all this, they may look like superficial things, but this is the way of gradually sublimating the basic elements of life, the elementary things of life. So, but this physical mind is playing it down, and he says, this is thy body's sweetest lure of bliss, assailed by pain, a frail, precarious form, to please for a few years thy faltering sense, with honey of physical longings and the heart's fire. The physical longing, the honey of physical longing, physical fulfillment, the heart's fire, all this, and a vain oneness seeking. You seek to be one, you seek union through the night, to embrace the brilliant idols of a fugitive hour. This is what you are seeking. All that you are asking is you want Satyavan back, and you say, no matter how vast the abyss is, how vast my inconscience is, you will follow me, you will chase me, do this, that, and the other. But all this effort, is this worth the result? After all, what is it? You are seeking something as basic, as basal, as elementary as this. You are seeking for a physical companion with whom you can spend a few hours so that your physical longing is satisfied? Is that all worth it? Is it all your philosophy, spirituality based on this? So he's kind of, bringing her down and making her feel maybe it's not worth all that. He's a very clever. I hope he won't be on our constitutional reviewing committee. He's very clever. You don't know what he will do. God of death. I always wondered if I were a judge and I had to judge on basis of arguments between Savitri and God of death, it would be very difficult to judge. Of course, Sri Aurobindo had judged in favor of Savitri. That's a different matter. But notice when Sri Aurobindo writes for the God of death, you really feel how much he has put into it. He is not at all, as I told you the other day, he is not at all partial towards Savitri. He is equally powerful, the God of death, and his arguments are equally powerful. And thou, what art thou? Soul, thou glorious dream. You say you are a soul meeting another soul. What is this soul? It is basically says, thou glorious dream of brief emotions made and glittering thoughts. A thin, when he comes to making little symbols and images, a thin dance of fireflies speeding through the night. The soul is no more than a cluster of fireflies. What is the place of fireflies? They cluster at night, just park for some time and they are gone. But it creates an illusion, oh, there is something very beautiful, very shining, etc. But it's not the shining of the sun, it's only fireflies. The soul is no more than the light of the fireflies. Their truth is no more significant than the truth about the fireflies. A thin dance of fireflies speeding through the night, a sparkling ferment in life's sunlit mire. You know what it is? The mire in this mud of life is being churned. And in this churning, a certain part sometimes gets exposed to the sun and suddenly you find it shining and that must be the soul. That is not the soul. It's simply the reflection of the sun. It's the mire. It's a mud. You are all mud. And this is a churning of the mud. And all this calling it soul and oh my soul and God, etc. All this is waste of time. Wilt thou claim immortality, O heart, crying against the eternal witness that thou and he are endless, sparse and last? This is a big joke. You say you and Satyavan are endless, sparse and you will last forever and ever. There must be some limit to your madness, O Savitri. I can understand. But this madness, you tell me honestly you want to have your husband back, but why do you have to say, I want eternity, I want love, I want this, I want that? You are fooling yourself, you are duping yourself. And all this claim of immortality. Wilt thou claim immortality, O heart, crying against the eternal witnesses that thou and he are endless, sparse and last? You and Satyavan are endless, sparse and you are going to last forever and ever? Death only lasts, and the inconscient void. You seem to be too immature, seem to be too green. You don't know the reality about this world. The only thing that lasts in this world is the void and death, not life. Death is the everlasting truth about this life, everlasting truth about this world. So surrender to me, just as I have rescued Satyavan, I can also rescue you. No, don't imagine, don't dream of perfection and living together and taking the world to God, etc. Death only lasts, and the inconscient void. I only am eternal and endure. Only I am eternal. Only I endure. I am the shapeless, formidable, vast. I am the emptiness that men call space. I am a timeless nothingness carrying all. I am the illimitable, the mute alone. In me did the world take birth like a bubble. Like a bubble, it will break. And I have given rise to innumerable such worlds, and innumerable such worlds have died in my bosom. I am the illimitable. I am the only thing enduring. I am the shapeless, formidable, vast. I am the emptiness that men call science. Sorry, space. I am a timeless nothingness carrying all. I am the illimitable, the mute alone. I, death, am He. There is no other God. Only supreme reality about this world is death. There is no other God. I, death, am He. There is no other God. All from my depths are born. They live by depth. All to my depths return and are no more. And what is Sri Aurobindo has been telling us? He has been telling us that death is no more than a process of life. Now, what has been death telling us? Death is telling us, I am the only reality, and life is a small, insignificant epiphenomenon, being born as a bubble on the foam of my surface, and it will just disappear. There are two, and therefore, naturally, Satyavan and the god of death have to wrestle it out, have to fight it out, and as you can see, the battle had just been joined. There are many more cantos that we have to see. I, death, am He. There is no other God. All from my depths are born. They live by death. They live by death. All to my depths return and are no more. I have made a world by my inconscient force. My force is nature that creates and slays, the hearts that hope, the limbs that long to live. They all come from me. The hope to live, the longing to live, has been invested into them by me. So, my force is nature that creates and slays. The hearts that hope, the limbs that long to live. I have made man her instrument and slave. I have made man the instrument of nature. I have made man the slave of nature. And nature is my force. So man therefore automatically is my slave, my instrument. His body I made my banquet, his life my food. His body is my banquet. I feed on his body. I am the hunger. And so I make him exquisite. So he becomes an exquisite morsel on my table. His body I made my banquet. His life my food. I don't think anyone else would have written all these things if one was not a poet. This is a poet's epic, poet's poem. Unfortunately, we are not readers, not poets. So why did you have to write 724 pages? 124 pages was more like it. I have always had a feeling, I have been telling you, if Hitler were not around, then Sri Aurobindo Savitri would at least have been 30,000 lines long. the most creative time of his life. When he was doing this, I think those 4 5 years, 41, 42, 43, 44, he was so busy with that guy, with that chap. If he were free, he probably would have more lines of poetry, greater poetry, and we could have gone on at least until the middle of the 21st century. Now this probably will go on for another couple of years, then have to stop. See, this is it. I mean, when people read, what is it I am reading? Is there something? It's not new. It's the poetic, efflorescence. It's a blossoming of poetry. Whatever he had to say, he has said in a few lines. But he's being a poet, he embellishes it. It comes in a kind of crescendo of inspiration. I have made man my instrument and slave. His body I made my banquet. His life my food. Man has no other help but only death. He comes to me at his end for rest and peace. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That is the Shanti of the cemetery, that is the Shanti of the tomb, and that is the only real Shanti. There is no other Shanti in this world. I am the giver of this ultimate relief and peace and rest for man. I, death, man has no other help but only death. He comes to me at his end for rest and peace. I, death, am the one refuge of thy soul. The gods to whom man prays can help not man. They are my imaginations and my moods. Gods are not real. We forget that's also what Shankaracharya said in a slightly different context. He said, gods also belong to this world of ignorance. In the world of Brahman, there are no gods. There is only undifferentiated, unchanging truth. And the God of death is also saying the same thing. The scientist and the traditional spiritualist more or less come to the same conclusion. One writes it on an email, the other writes it on different medium. That's about all. Scientist writes it on an email, so it looks very modern. And these fellows have been writing on barks of trees, then on various manuscripts, etc. The truth is the same, more or less. This is the truth. That gods to whom man prays can help not man. They are my imaginations and my moods, reflected in him by illusion's power. They are also a creation of Maya. This vast net of Maya that I have cast on this creation. And gods are a part of this. That which thou seest as thy immortal self, that which you think is your immortal self, the most precious thing in me, that which never dies, etc., etc. What is it? Is a shadowy icon of my infinite. Is death in thee, dreaming of eternity. What you think is soul is a symbol of me. What you call your soul is an icon, is a symbol of my infinite. And what does it do? Is death in thee, dreaming of eternity. It is simply a dreaming of eternity. And who is the dreamer? The dreamer is this soul. And who is this soul? This soul is a symbol of myself in you. So what you have seated deep within you is a symbol of myself, is a symbol of death. And this death contemplating eternity, you mistake it to be a quality of your soul. The dream of what is seated in your heart, you think is the quality of your soul, and you think your soul is immortal. Nothing of that kind. That which thou seest as thy immortal self is a shadow icon of my infinite. Is death in thee dreaming of eternity? I am the immobile in which all things move. I am the nude inane to which they seek, in which they cease. I have no body and no tongue to speak. I commune not with a human eye and ear. Only thy thought gave a figure to my void. I am the infinite. And what you see, what you hear as my voice is something created by your mind. The god of death that you see, which you imagine, his form, etc., is a creation of your mind. I am basically formless infinite. I am the infinite. Because, O aspirant to divinity, thou calledst me to wrestle with thy soul, I have assumed a face, a form, a voice. Don't think what you see is me. It is me as created and permitted by your mind. The world that we create is a function, is a creation product of the mind. And therefore, on all spiritual paths, they require that you reach a stage where this mind created, mind projected world is annihilated completely. And only then you begin to see the reality as it is. Now he just turns it around and says, I am also like that. I am also the eternal. I am also the infinite. Nobody has seen me yet. But what you see here as the form Yama is your mind's creation. So it is for your sake, because you are so anxious and eager to wage a war with me, you have challenged me and you have thought of me, projected me in this form. Because, O aspirant to divinity, thou calledst me to wrestle with thy soul. I have assumed a face, a form, a voice. But if there were a being witnessing all, how should he help thy passionate desire? If, let us say, there is a being, someone decent like God, you think. Suppose there is a God, how will he help you? How will you help your passionate desire to get back Satyavan? Now, God in his nature, as far as I know him, he doesn't exist, but I have also studied what people say about God. He is infinite. He is avyakta. He is beyond all manifestation. And what do you want? You don't want something beyond manifestation. You are very specific. You want Satyavan. That's all you want. How can God help you? Immortality, you have to live in Kaivalya, all by yourself. You can't say, oh, I am in Kaivalya, I want Satyavan. This is a childish thing, oh Savitri. You don't even understand what you are undertaking. You don't even know what you are talking about. Aloof he watches, sole and absolute, indifferent to thy cry in nameless calm. Do you mean to say God has time to note your complaint? That Satyavan is gone, I want him back. If he has a diary, I don't know how many such complaints he can write. There are crores and crores of people in this world. Everybody has a complaint, not one, but several. Unless he has a crores of eyes to look at all these complaints, how will you ever see this? If there is a God, he is there in a safe place. He is there in the infinite, unmanifest. He is Sat and Chit and Ananda. He is all blissfully, peacefully there, happy there. And you are here saying, I want Satyavan, I want Satyavan. What is this? How should he help thy passionate desire? Aloof he watches soul and absolute, indifferent to thy cry in nameless calm. His being is pure, unwounded, motionless, one. Almost talking like an Advaitin. He is motionless. He is one, unwounded. There is some such verse, right, about Asnaviram. What is it? What verse is it? He is without any sin. He is without any blemish. He is unwounded, nothing. Oh, if there is a God, that I am not very sure I want to grant to you because I am the only God. But suppose there is a God, he is of this nature, he is unmanifest, unwounded, unmoved. His being is pure, unwounded, motionless, one. One endless watches the inconscient scene, where all things perish as the foam the stars. All that the God sees is this creation coming up and then being destroyed. The one lives forever, and where this one lives, there no Satyavan changing was born. There no Savitri claims from brief life her bribe of joy. In that infinity, there is no Satyavan, there is no Savitri, and Savitri wanting to get back Satyavan is something you can't even speak in God's language. He doesn't know this language. He can't even understand this because he is unwounded, he is unmoved, he is one, single, etc., etc. And therefore he said, there no Satyavan, changing was born, and there no Savitri claims from brief life her bribe of joy. There love came never with his fretful eyes of tears. There is no lover and no beloved. Where the only lives, only Supreme lives, how will he understand that you need Satyavan, you love, he is the lover, beloved, all these things? Came never with his fretful eyes of tears. No time is there, nor the vain vasts of space. It wears no living face. It has no name, no gaze, no heart that throbs. It asks no second to aid its being or to share its joy. It doesn't say, I want Satyavan, otherwise my life is incomplete. How can these two things be even compatible? Let us say there is a God and you want God to help you, you are seeking God, but in God's system of values, there is no duality, there is no lover, no beloved, it's only one. No creation exists, no God exists, nothing exists, and now you are saying, it wears no living face, it has no name, no gaze, no heart that throbs, it asks no second to aid its being or to share its joys. It is delight immortally alone. In the alone, there is no place for Savitri and Satyavan. It is alone. It is delight immortally alone. He spells it out. He feels Savitri hasn't understood this. If thou desirest immortality, be then alone sufficient to thy soul. Live in thyself. Forget the man thou lovest. If you want immortality, then your soul should be sufficient unto yourself. You should not be saying, for the fullness of my soul, I want Satyavan. That's entirely contradictory to this realm, the experience of this realm. Now, after, you know what he is trying to do? He has tried to browbeat her. He has tried to terrorize her. He has tried to create fear in her. He has tried to boast that if you violate any of nature's laws, you will be punished down the centuries, etc., etc. Then Savitri is unmoved. So he thinks he can use argument reason with Savitri and convince her how unreasonable Savitri has been. The reason, they say, is it? Politics is the last refuge of what is it? Reason is something similar. It's the last refuge and they don't want to give it up. So everybody thinks, if intelligent men are shown reason, what they are doing is reasonable, they are more than pleased. So for everything there has to be a reason. So now, God of Death is trying to play this game and trying to say, even according to tenets of reason, Savitri, what you have been asking for makes no sense. And therefore, quit this whole thing, make an about turn, and march back to where you belong. We have now seen the God of Death trying to become very reasonable and suggesting, if you desire immortality, then you will have to learn all by yourself. And this dependence on someone else, Satyavan, is unbecoming of an aspirant to immortality. In other words, his understanding of Savitri's love is dependence. He thinks it is some kind of vital dependence on someone else. That he can't understand love as identity, love as a total surrender of one's ego, one's individuality. These things are still unlearned by the God of Death. He hasn't learned these things. He will have gradually learned this from Savitri. He now thinks that love is basically this ego's dependence on another ego. That's what love is basically. And therefore he says, as long as you do not give up this hankering after someone else, somebody else's ego supporting your ego, etc., you cannot be a candidate for immortality. That's what he's saying. If thou desirest immortality, be then alone sufficient to thy soul. Live in thyself, forget the man thou lovest. You must forget the man you love. My last grand death shall rescue thee from life. Then shalt thou rise into thy unmoved source. And someday, when you die, through me, you can ascend to this status of unmoved source. This immortality that you are talking about, I will grant you and you will ascend to that immortality through me. But the qualification for it is, you must eschew, you must give up this attachment to Satyavan. So as I said, Savitri's attachment is what the God of Death understands by Savitri's love of Satyavan. Now the difference between attachment and love is very great and very subtle. It may look, real love also may look like attachment. And so now this is what he thinks, that you are dependent on Satyavan and that you must give up. And once you do that, no love, no attachment, no manifestation, no other, you have withdrawn yourself into yourself. In other words, you have completely disassociated yourself from all this creation, manifestation. You are willing to forget this. Then you are a candidate for immortality. And after you die, I will make sure that you attain to this immortality. But you, on the other hand, are so impudent, so insolent. You don't want to give up your dependence or attachment to Satyavan. and you want Satyavan, you want fulfillment, you want permanence, everything here on this shore of life and not on the other shore. This is very elementary, Savitri. Nobody has ever aspired for it, nobody has ever achieved it. You are wasting your time and my time. That is the wisdom the god of death now has to offer to Savitri. But Savitri replied to the dread voice, O death, who reasonest, I reason not. You have now started using the language of reason. I do not use that kind of reason. There are two kinds of reason. One, a reason that scans and breaks, decomposes. Reason that divides, reason that separates, reason that helps you to disintegrate something. There is another kind of reason, and that reason is a reason that brings together, that harmonizes, that unites. And the god of death has one kind of reason that scans and breaks, but cannot build, or builds in vain because she doubts her work. See, this is the problem of reason. Reason is like Bhasmasura. You heard the story of Bhasmasura? They haven't started a serial on Bhasmasura yet, I suppose. Right? You must have. There are many of these Bhasmasuras. The story simply is, he being a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva being a bhola, so he is pleased, and he doesn't weigh his words. Whatever you ask, he offers you. Then it's Vishnu has to find out way out. That is Vishnu's job. So they have endless correspondence between Brahma and Vishnu and etc. And this man said, look, I want a boon by which whatever I touch must disintegrate into ashes. Nobody should be able to withstand my touch, whatever I touch. And the words are simple, tathastu. Shiva says tathastu. So this man's terrorization has started, like modern politics. Whatever it touches, it disintegrates. If you don't touch it, it can have chance for living. So he goes on, and then the gods are horrified. The whole three worlds tremble at his name. Then Vishnu, of course, has a way, and Vishnu comes in the form of an extremely beautiful damsel. By looking at her, Bhasmasur naturally falls in love with her and tries to do whatever she does. She starts a dance. Bhasmasur also starts imitating that dance. And one of the gestures in the dance is this lady puts her hand on her own head. And Bhasmasur has to follow suit. And then when he puts his own hand on his head, he disintegrates into a mound of bhasma. That's what happens. So reason is like that. Reason builds. The problem with reason is after building, because reason is a finite mind's scavenger. You see, after doing everything and you are absolutely sure that the premises are clean, if the premises are clean, scavenger has no job, what will he do? So he starts creating work for himself. And so after building this beautiful thing, he starts doubting it. He doubts everything. There is a beautiful letter Sri Aurobindo once wrote to Dilip Kumar Roy, where he says the nature of doubt is to doubt. It doesn't know when to stop. Doubt is a very healthy thing to have. But like everything else, like sugar and salt, etc., it must be used with discretion, within limits. So you have this kind of reason which scans, which analyzes, sometimes which also builds, but after building it doubts it. So constantly building and then pulling it down and again building and again pulling it down and again building. This is because the finite mind cannot look at any problem from all possible angles. The same finite mind which saw a truth from one perspective, when it changes its perspective for whatever reason, what seemed to it right and correct on day A, the same thing it looks at on day B, it all looks wrong. So it pulls it down and reconstructs it. But then there are other angles to it. You see, this is the difference between what Sri Aurobindo calls the logic of the finite and the logic of the infinite. The logic of the infinite, every perspective on truth is a complementary perspective. It is not the only perspective. Now, reason doesn't have this facility. It is either this or nothing else. And so reason's problem is, it looks at a problem, it's a very great aid, it's a great help. Nobody has ever said you just surrender your reason. Sri Aurobindo always said, when I say surrender, the first thing people surrender is common sense. So, no, you are not asked to surrender reason, but use it for the purpose for which it is given. And reason, he says, go, Yama, you are now using reason. But you are using a kind of reason which only scans and breaks, but cannot build. It cannot put things back into shape, into form, or even when it does, or builds in vain, because she doubts her work. I am, I love, I see, I act, I will. Now there is a very famous Western philosopher who said, I think, therefore I am. This is like putting somebody on his head. It's not, instead of saying, I am, therefore I think, he says, I think, therefore I am. But somehow the West seems this is the highest reach of Western philosophy. Since I am not a philosopher, you shouldn't take my comments on it very seriously. But here what Savitri says, first I am, I exist, I live. What does I live mean? I live simply doesn't mean I vegetate. To live is to love. To live is to act. Live is to will. Live is to see. All this is a part of living. It's simply, what's the difference between a human beings living and animals living, or the living of a tree or a living of a lump of stone? This is the difference. A human being, when he lives meaningfully. He also loves, he sees, he acts, he wills. Living is a way of constantly growing, constantly bringing to manifestation greater and greater aspects of the Lord's infinity. This is living, and not simply just living. So I am, I love, I see, I act, I will. Doesn't say I reason. But all these things, I have a will with which I will. I have a heart with which I love. I have my senses with which I see. I respond to the world outside. I act. I have a body. I have an entire being with which I act. So for me, living, even when I live my immortality, these things will continue to be a part of my living. What does God death says is living, and all these things are mutually exclusive. And Savitri is saying, I do not care for that kind of immortality. I want to be immortal in being and also in becoming. This is the difference Sri Aurobindo makes between timeless eternity and time eternity. So wherever Savitri says things, since she is basically a child of Sri Aurobindo's imagination, this character here in this epic, she is his mouthpiece, and she every time asserts the basic truths of his philosophy. Therefore, he says, I am, I love, I see, I act, I will. Death answered her. One deep surrounding cry. No also. You left out another verb, important verb, to know. No also, knowing. Thou shalt cease to love and cease to will, delivered from my heart. Delivered from thy heart. What he is saying, loving is possible only when you don't know enough. If you know, then love automatically dries up from your heart. Thou shalt cease to love and cease to will, delivered from thy heart. Now this is the seed of what modern philosophers, psychologists, social anthropologists talk about alienation in man. The division between the heart from the mind. You know, and then knowing is something, and my heart is something, and mind is something. And this is the source of all alienation in man. Man's being is integral. Knowing, being, loving, all these have to be one integral act. Now what man has introduced is he has separated his various parts, division from heart and mind, and this is in one sense a form of death. This division of man's personality. And if you really see modern education, you will see to the extent modern education is what modern education is, it is in fact a territory of death. Because for our growing children, it teaches this disintegration of a human personality. It doesn't let them grow as whole beings. And this is as we are making sure my children will end up as doctors and engineers and computer specialists, we also make sure they grow up as splintered beings, not whole beings. This wholeness of an individual, where all these things are mutually dependent and they have to grow together, that doesn't happen. And therefore said, know also, knowing thou shalt cease to love and cease to will, delivered from thy heart. So shalt thou rest forever and be still, consenting to the impermanence of things. If you really know, this is the way of the cynical world, then you will hardly find anybody in the world worth loving. Everybody has warts. Everybody has some imperfections. So ignorance is bliss. And so you love people because you know the person fully well. Don't know the person fully well. If you really knew the person fully well, then you will be forewarned, forearmed, and before you fall in love, you sign a contract of divorce. Suppose divorce take place, then what is it I should take and what is it you should take? It's a sign of wisdom, isn't it? You know everything. So it is this that the God of death is proclaiming. God of death is not simply death. Whatever diminishes life, whatever makes life painful, they are all various avatars of this God of death, and they surround us all over. It is not in one place. He has spread his influence all around us, and the various philosophies that come. Fascism, for example, is another form of the god of death. All kind of dictatorship is a form of death. If you really look at the way Sri Aurobindo develops this entire notion of death, it is not merely a metaphysical notion, it's not merely a philosophical notion. Death is there in all fields of our life. Its influence is there in all fields of our life. And therefore he says, if you know somebody, you will think twice before you are losing heart to him. Cease to will, because whatever you build here doesn't last forever. What's the point in building? What's the point in exerting? Because anything that is built here, any institution, like in Shelley's poem Ozymandias, big, huge statue, laid, dismembered, all the monuments just lie desecrated or become victims of time. So if you know all this, you say nothing is permanent in this world, nothing is worth building, no person is really worth your love. And therefore, you will say, I don't want this world, I don't want this world. There is a spirituality that is afraid of this world. There is a spirituality that is afraid of love. I had a friend of mine who was we grew up together, but he became a great man. And I knew he was very fond of children, little children. He never got married, he never did anything in life. He was looking for God. There came a time in his life he was even afraid of smiling at a little child for fear of being attached to the child. This can happen. And of course, smiles have misled many people in many ways. I am not blaming him. You see what I am trying to say? If at all there is anything spiritual, one must take the world with you, not shut out the world. That kind of spirituality is not Savitri's spirituality, and therefore he's saying, God of death is arguing against it and saying, know also, knowing thou shalt cease to love and cease to will, delivered from thy heart, so shalt thou rest forever and be still, consenting to the impermanence of things. But Savitri replied for man to death on behalf of man. Savitri says, when I have loved forever, I shall know. Once you love, and you love forever, how can you love forever if your love is based on any expectation? See, love, Mother has said many things about this. She said it's a great vibration from the divine. And if you can heart ever receive that vibration, you would know for the first time what divine bliss is all about. See, we think love is basically giving and sharing, and therefore it diminishes you. And so we want all kinds of little compromises about love, kind of arrangements. But love, if it is real love, it is not for a while. It is not for 5 years. It is not for some return. It is forever. Only then, if you are capable of such love, then only you know. Otherwise, you don't know. Because love then becomes an instrument of your ego and not of your soul. It is only love which is forever, love which is for no return. It's only that kind of love that makes you understand the other person, understand the world, understand life. And therefore he says, when I have loved forever, I shall know. Love in me knows the truth, all changings mask. Love in me understands the reality behind all masks. Every human being, whatever he may look, his imperfections, his inadequacies, these are all masks worn by that very pure spark of the divine that he bears within his heart. And when you love a person, basically you love that. And you don't love the outer trappings. Outer trappings are trappings of that inner flame of God that the individual engenders. Now, how can you love that in a spirit of a bargain, in a spirit of kind of temporary, transient love? It is something forever. Only then do you understand reality, then you understand truth. I know that a knowledge is a vast embrace. I know that every being is myself. In every heart is the hidden, the myriad one. This knowledge, O God of death, that I am talking about is what we call knowledge, is what we call Ya Vidya Sa Muktaye. That is knowledge which liberates you. Liberates you from what? Liberates you from your narrowness. Liberates you from your separateness. And makes you feel a part of the one whole divine who is manifested in this world. Only that knowledge. I know that knowledge is a vast embrace. If you have knowledge, knowledge of this oneness, knowledge of this experience. You see, this knowledge is a very, very funny word. Western philosophers have often used this knowledge to mean Indian in Upanishads and so on, there is no emphasis on moral purity, moral perfection. That is the interpretation of many Western scholars. Upanishads talk about knowledge, and knowledge as if it is intellectual knowledge. They talk knowledge not in that terms, because when Narad goes to Sanat Kumar and says to him, "Oh sir, I have learned all that books and knowledge have to teach me, and yet I haven't understood. Give me the knowledge of that by knowing which I know everything else." Knowledge is the experience of this oneness. That is knowledge, and Upanishads basically talk about this. But the Westerners, not knowing this, think that India, there is no great insistence on moral excellence in the Upanishads. Upanishads barely talk about knowledge, in the sense the kind of knowledge you get Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge, that knowledge. It is not that knowledge. It's basically this experience of oneness where the other disappears. There is no other. The whole world is yourself through many faces, many eyes, many ears, just yourself. He says, all right, I am all for knowledge, but this is the knowledge. I know that knowledge is a vast embrace. I know that every being is myself. That's knowledge. Every being is myself. In every heart is hidden the myriad one, the one who has become many. He is hidden in every heart. And what is it that makes another man? Why do you love him? Everything you analyze, if you think everything for which you love a man from the outside is transient. The shine on his face, the redness of his lips, the luster in his hair, all these are transient. What will do when they disappear? But the shining, the inner shining of the man is eternal and permanent. If you have seen that, and if you love that, there will be never any scope for any kind of disappointment and frustration. And so he says, it is this one who has become many. It is that in every heart is hidden the myriad one. I know the calm transcendent bears the world, the veiled inhabitant, the silent Lord. I feel his secret, this his secret act, his intimate fire. I hear the murmur of the cosmic voice. I see God in this entire becoming. And therefore I cannot say, I want my immortality, I don't want this world. How can a man love the being of God without also loving the becoming of God? So for me, seeking Satyavan is only a symbolic seeking. It is not seeking Satyavan to the exclusion of everything else. Satyavan for me is the world becoming is Satyavan for me. I seek that. I seek oneness with that. I know that the calm transcendent bears the world. This entire world is supported by the calm transcendent supreme, the veiled inhabitant, the silent Lord. I feel his secret act, his intimate fire. This transcendent Lord is intimate to us. He is as close to us as the pulse of our nerves, as the beat of our heart. He is seated there. He is the inmost reality of all of us. And I know my coming was a wave from God. I am not just come from the inconscient. I am not just a bubble on the foam of time. I am a wave from the Lord, from God. I know my coming was a wave from God. If my coming is a wave from God, what about your coming? It's also a wave from God. You see, this is what Western liberalism has lost. See, they say all human beings are equal. Democracy is based on this feeling of equality. How is President Clinton equal to a laborer who works in a garden? In every way, they are unequal. All these university professors who are so learned, what is the basis of equality? What is the basis of democracy? Why should I regard myself equal to somebody who polishes my shoes or your shoes? Why? How are we equal? No two human beings are equal. Some are more gifted, some are more useful, some can make a greater contribution. How am I equal to him? Only Upanishads have the ultimate reply. We are equal because the soul that we bear within us is all a spark of the divine, and there is no distinction between the spark that you carry and the spark that I carry. That is the basis of democracy. That's what Sri Aurobindo is saying, and that's why he says Western liberalism will never succeed in practice. It's a great ideal, they have a great ideal, but they haven't gone to the source. Democracy is a spiritual ideal, and they take away the spirit in it and leave only the outer framework. And so, this whole idea that I am a becoming, I am a wave of God, and God lives in every heart, and the God who lives in every heart, there is no inequality there. There, the quality of the divine, the quality of the supreme is the same. And that's the basis of our oneness, and not the accidental features that Clinton went to Oxford and Cambridge, etc., and therefore became so clever, etc. That's all incidental. But the spark of the divine that resides in him is of the same value as the spark of the divine that resides in anyone else. This is the spiritual truth that Savitri wants to uphold. I know my coming was a wave from God, for all his sons were conscient in my birth, and one who loves in us came veiled by death. The one who loves in us, the real love, is not something that emanates from the heart or from the mind. Love is a quality of the soul. Love is a property of the soul. And the soul that comes here into birth always comes veiled by death. And man is here to make sure that death slowly relaxes his hold on the soul. And the soul gets an embodiment which matches his inherent immortality. Now what has happened is the immortal soul lives in a mortal body. That mismatch has to be worked out, and man has been given by God the instruments that he has, his heart, his mind, etc., which makes him self-conscious, self-aware. For the first time, consciousness in this creation becoming self-aware, so that the consciousness can cooperate with God's purpose in this world. And what is the purpose in this world? The purpose in this world is to give the soul a body the soul deserves. Now the soul doesn't have a body it deserves, because the soul is immortal and the body is mortal, a net of diseases, a home ground for decay, and we are here to work that out. So therefore he says, then was man born among the monstrous stars, endowed with a mind and heart to conquer thee. Man's purpose here is to conquer death, so that the soul gets the environment, the body, the soul really deserves. Now, soul is immortal, but surrounded by this veil of death that mocks at it, that teases it, that challenges it. And through all this, someday man is going to reach there, get there, and is going to conquer you. This is what Savitri says, and this is more or less the end of this canto. We have a few more lines which basically conclude the canto. In the eternity of his ruthless will, sure of his empire and his armored might, like one disdaining violent, helpless words, from victim lips, death answered not again. For the present, death decided he should maintain silence for a while. In the eternity of his ruthless will, he is not yet shaken. Savitri has only used some of her arguments. This will go on for another 3 cantos, another 60, 70 pages, until death is going to say, "Oh Savitri, I am out of breath, I have no more arguments left. Please." Now he has not yet reached that stage. He says, all right, this is the first round, she has had the better of me, maybe second round I will probably have the better of her. So he is just maintaining. He stood in silence and in darkness wrapped, a figure motionless, a shadow vague, girt with the terrors of his secret sword. Half seen in clouds appeared a somber face. Up there, the face of death, half covered by clouds, a somber face. Night's dusk tiara was his matted hair. All the clouds, etc., and the even fading light looked like his matted hair.